My name is Rachel, and I'm a 26-year-old freelance graphic designer living in Portland. Last October, I agreed to house sit for my aunt's friend while she was on a 2-week cruise to Alaska. The woman's name was Mrs. Garrett, and she lived alone in this old craftsman house about 40 minutes outside the city, tucked away in a neighborhood where the homes sit far apart, separated by tall Douglas firs and overgrown hedges. I'd met Mrs. Garrett maybe twice before at family gatherings. She seemed nice enough, a retired librarian in her late 60s with 2 cats named Poe and Lovecraft. She offered me $500 for the 2 weeks, which I desperately needed since my freelance work had been slow. The deal was simple: feed the cats, water the plants, bring in the mail, and keep the place looking lived in. She even said I could use her office to work since the Wi-Fi was good. The house was beautiful in that old, creaky kind of way. Hardwood floors that groaned with every step, high ceilings, and windows with the original glass that made everything outside look slightly warped. Mrs. Garrett gave me a full tour before she left, showing me where the cat food was, how to work the temperamental thermostat, and which floorboards to avoid if I didn't want to wake the whole house. She also mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that sometimes the neighborhood kids would cut through her backyard as a shortcut to the main road. "Don't be alarmed if you hear footsteps outside at night," she said with a laugh. "They're harmless, just lazy teenagers." The first few days were completely fine. I fell into a comfortable routine, working during the day, making dinner in her cozy kitchen, and spending evenings reading on her couch with the cats curled up beside me. The isolation was actually nice. I'm used to city noise, sirens, traffic, people yelling at all hours. The quiet felt like a luxury. It wasn't until the 4th night that things started feeling off. I was in bed around midnight when I heard footsteps on the back porch. Heavy, deliberate steps, not the quick patter of teenagers cutting through. I remembered what Mrs. Garrett had said and tried to convince myself it was nothing. But then the steps stopped right outside the bedroom window. I could hear breathing, or maybe it was just the wind. I lay there frozen, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound to move on. After what felt like forever, the footsteps retreated, crunching through the leaves in the backyard. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I checked the backyard. There were fresh footprints in the dirt near the porch, way too large to belong to any teenager. Size 12, maybe 13. I took a picture of them with my phone, though I wasn't sure why. Part of me wanted to call my aunt, but I felt ridiculous. What was I going to say? That I heard footsteps and found prints in the yard? Mrs. Garrett had literally warned me about this. That evening, I made sure every door and window was locked before bed. I even wedged a chair under the back door handle, something I'd seen in movies but never thought I'd actually do. I tried to work on a project to distract myself, but I kept glancing at the windows, half expecting to see a face pressed against the glass. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound downstairs. It was faint but distinct. The slow creak of someone walking across the living room floor. My heart started hammering. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911, and listened. The footsteps moved slowly, methodically, like someone was searching for something. Then they stopped. I waited in bed for probably 20 minutes, barely breathing, before I worked up the courage to check. I crept downstairs with my phone flashlight, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. The living room was empty. The front door was still locked. The chair was still wedged under the back door. Nothing seemed out of place except for one thing. The door to the basement was open. I knew I had closed it earlier. Mrs. Garrett had specifically told me to keep it closed because the cats liked to knock over paint cans down there. I stood there staring at that dark doorway, my mind racing. Then I heard it again, a single creak from somewhere below. That was it. I slammed the basement door shut, locked it, ran back upstairs, locked myself in the bedroom, and called my aunt. She didn't answer. It was the middle of the night. I left a voicemail that probably sounded insane, then sat on the bed with a pair of scissors in my hand until the sun came up. The next morning, I searched the entire house. I checked every closet, every room, every corner of the basement. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No evidence anyone had been inside. I started wondering if I was losing my mind. Maybe the old house was just settling. Maybe I was so on edge that I was imagining things. But then, I found the note. It was on the kitchen counter, written on a torn piece of lined paper in shaky handwriting. "I know you're staying here alone." I didn't even pack. I grabbed my laptop, my keys, and my overnight bag and left. I called Mrs. Garrett from the road, stumbling over my words as I tried to explain. She was surprisingly calm. She told me she'd had similar experiences over the years, strange noises. Things moved around, the feeling of being watched. She'd always chalked it up to the house being old, but she admitted she'd never felt entirely comfortable there alone. She told me not to worry about the cats, she'd have a neighbor check on them. She also mentioned, almost casually, that the previous owner had been a recluse who died in the house, and that sometimes she wondered if he'd ever really left. I stayed at my apartment after that. Mrs. Garrett came home a week early and didn't seem surprised when I told her I wouldn't be going back. She paid me the full $500 anyway and said she understood. I still don't know what was happening in that house. Maybe it was just an old building making old building noises. Maybe someone really was getting in somehow. Or maybe Mrs. Precation. Garrett was right and some people just don't leave, even after they're gone. All I know is I'll never house sit again. I live alone in a rental duplex on the east side of Portland. It's one of those older places built in the 1940s, kind of charming but also kind of falling apart. The landlord is cheap, so things break a lot and take forever to get fixed, but the rent is manageable, and I like my privacy, so I deal with it. This happened 3 nights ago on a Tuesday. I'd gotten home from work around 6:30, made some pasta, and settled in to watch Netflix. It was one of those quiet weeknights where you're just decompressing from the day. The weather had been stormy all week, lots of rain and wind, so I was glad to be inside. Around 9:45, I was halfway through an episode of some crime documentary when every single light in my apartment went out at once. Not flickering, not gradual. Just instant darkness. My first thought was that a transformer blew or something. Storms had been knocking out power all over the city. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, then walked over to the window to check the neighborhood. Every house on my street still had their lights on. Every single one. Porch lights, living room windows glowing, even the street lights were fine. It was only my half of the duplex that was dark. I could see light coming from under the door that connects to my neighbor's unit. She was home, and she definitely still had power. That's when I started to feel uneasy. I went to check the breaker box, which is located in a small utility closet near the back door. I opened it up and shined my phone light inside. Every single breaker had been flipped to the off position. Not tripped. Manually switched off. I just stood there staring at it for a second, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Breakers don't just flip themselves. Someone had to physically open this box and turn them all off. My first thought was maybe the landlord came by to do maintenance or something and forgot to tell me. But that didn't make sense. It was almost 10 at night, and he would have texted me. Then I thought maybe I'd somehow done it myself earlier without realizing it. But I hadn't been near that closet all day. I stood there with my hand on the panel, debating whether to flip them back on, when I heard something. A creak. Not loud, but distinct. It came from the front of the apartment, near the living room. Old houses creak all the time, I know that. But this felt different. It felt deliberate. I turned off my phone's flashlight and just listened. Another creak. Then nothing. My heart was pounding now. I backed away from the breaker box slowly, holding my phone, but keeping the light off. I didn't want to give away where I was. 911, but what would I even say? That my breakers were off and I heard a creak? They'd think I was paranoid. I moved quietly through the dark apartment toward my bedroom. My plan was to lock myself in, call the non-emergency line, and just wait it out. I made it about halfway down the hall when I heard the back door handle rattle. Not like someone was trying to break in. Like someone was testing to see if it was locked. I froze. The rattling stopped. Then I heard footsteps on the gravel outside, moving around the side of the house toward the front. That's when I ran. I locked myself in the bedroom, shoved a chair under the door handle, and called 911. My voice was shaking so badly I could barely get the words out. I told them someone was outside my house, that my power had been cut, and I thought they were trying to get in. The dispatcher kept me on the line. She said officers were on their way and told me to stay where I was. I sat on my bed in the dark, gripping my phone, listening to every sound. I could hear footsteps on the front porch now, slow, deliberate. Then the doorknob turned. Thank God I'd locked it. Whoever was out there jiggled the handle a few times, then stopped. I heard more footsteps, this time moving away from the door. The police showed up about 6 minutes later, which felt like an eternity. I heard them knock and announce themselves. I came out of the bedroom and let them in. There were two officers, both young, both taking it seriously. They searched the property with flashlights. One of them checked the breaker box and confirmed that all the switches had been manually flipped off. The other officer found fresh footprints in the mud around the perimeter of my unit. They also found something else. There were pry marks on the back door frame, like someone had tried to force it open but gave up. The officers told me it looked like someone had scoped out my place, cut my power to see if I was home, and then tried to get inside when they realized I was. They think I scared them off by calling 911. One of the officers asked if I'd noticed anyone watching the house or following me recently. I said no, but honestly, I hadn't been paying attention. They took a report, checked all my locks, and told me to call immediately if anything else happened. They also suggested I get a deadbolt for the back door and maybe a camera. After they left, I flipped the breakers back on. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on my couch with all the lights on, checking the windows every few minutes. I called my landlord the next morning and told him what happened. He installed a new deadbolt that same day and said he'd look into getting security cameras for both units. I haven't seen anyone suspicious since, but I also haven't felt safe. I keep thinking about how close it was. If I hadn't locked that back door, if I'd been asleep, if I hadn't noticed the breakers. I don't know who it was or what they wanted, but they knew exactly what they were doing. And they knew I was home alone. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm 22 years old. I still live at home while finishing my degree at the local community college, which I know sounds lame, but rent in the Bay Area is insane, and my parents don't mind. This happened last November when they went to visit my grandmother in Taiwan for 2 weeks. It was the first time I'd ever been completely alone in our house for more than a couple of days. Our house is in Fremont, one of those older suburban neighborhoods where the houses are spread out and most of your neighbors are retirees who go to bed at 8 p.m. My parents left on a Tuesday morning, and I remember feeling almost excited about having the place to myself. No one to ask where I'm going, what time I'll be back, or why I'm eating cereal for dinner. Just me, the house, and 2 weeks of freedom. The first few days were completely normal. I went to class, came home, watched Netflix, ordered takeout. I FaceTimed my parents once to let them know I was still alive. Everything was fine until Friday night. I got home around 9 p.m. after studying at the library. I pulled into the driveway and noticed the porch light was off, which was weird because I specifically remembered leaving it on that morning. I figured the bulb had just blown, so I made a mental note to change it later. I unlocked the front door and went inside. The house felt different somehow. I can't explain it, but there was this heaviness in the air, like when you walk into a room and you know someone was just there. I stood in the entryway for a minute, listening. Nothing, just the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the house settling. I told myself I was being paranoid and headed to the kitchen to grab some water. That's when I saw it. The back door was slightly ajar. Not wide open, just cracked about an inch, enough that I could see darkness through the gap. My stomach dropped. I always lock that door. It's basically muscle memory at this point. I stood there frozen, staring at it, trying to remember if maybe I'd taken the trash out that morning and forgotten to lock it afterward. But I hadn't taken the trash out. I knew I hadn't. I should have called the police right then. That's what any reasonable person would do. But instead, I did something incredibly stupid. I walked over and closed the door, making sure to lock it this time. Then I did a quick walk through the downstairs, turning on every light as I went. Living room, dining room, bathroom, laundry room. Everything looked normal. Nothing was missing or out of place. I went upstairs and checked all 3 bedrooms and the bathroom. Also normal. I started to relax a little, convincing myself that maybe I really had forgotten to lock the back door. Maybe the wind had blown it open. It was a breezy night after all. I changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt, made myself some ramen, and settled on the couch to watch a movie. About halfway through, maybe around 11:30, I heard something. It was faint, coming from upstairs. A soft creaking sound, like someone slowly walking across the floorboards in my parents' bedroom. Old houses make noise all the time, I told myself. It's just the wood expanding and contracting with the temperature change. But then I heard it again. This time it was clearer, more deliberate. Creak. Pause. Creak. Pause. Like footsteps. I muted the TV and sat perfectly still, barely breathing. For about 30 seconds there was nothing. Then I heard it again, followed by what sounded like a drawer being slowly pulled open. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Someone was in my house. Someone was upstairs, in my parents' bedroom, going through their things. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. I whispered to the dispatcher what was happening, and she told me to get out of the house immediately and wait outside for the officers. I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed my keys and ran out the front door, not even bothering to close it behind me. I stood in the driveway in my bare feet, watching the upstairs windows. I didn't see any lights or movement. The police arrived maybe 6 minutes later, which felt like an eternity. 2 officers got out, and I explained everything. They drew their weapons and went inside while I waited in the back of a patrol car. They were in there for probably 15 minutes. When they came back out, one of them told me they'd searched the entire house, including the attic and basement. No one was there. All the windows were locked from the inside. Nothing appeared to be missing or disturbed. The officer asked if I was sure I'd heard something in this kind tone that made it clear he thought I was just a scared kid alone in a big house. I felt like an idiot. I apologized for wasting their time, and they told me not to worry about it, that it's better to be safe. They suggested I have a friend stay over if I was nervous. After they left, I went back inside, but there was no way I was sleeping upstairs. I locked every door and window I could find, pushed a chair against the front door, and spent the night on the couch with all the lights on and a kitchen knife on the coffee table. The next morning, I went upstairs to grab some clothes. My parents' bedroom looked exactly like it always did. But when I walked past their dresser, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The top drawer, the one where my mom keeps her jewelry, was open about 2 inches. I know for a fact it had been closed the day before because I'd walked past it when I checked the house. I called my best friend Amanda and begged her to come stay with me. She showed up that afternoon with an overnight bag and a baseball bat. We spent the rest of the weekend together, and nothing else happened. No strange noises, no open doors, nothing. My parents came home the following Tuesday. I never told them what happened. I didn't want to freak them out or sound crazy, but I did ask my dad to install a security camera at the back door, claiming I wanted to keep an eye on the neighborhood cats that kept knocking over our trash cans. He did it the same week. I've watched that footage from November obsessively. The camera started recording 3 days after the incident, but sometimes late at night, I still pull up the app on my phone and watch the live feed, just to make sure the back door is closed and locked. I don't know if someone was actually in the house that night or if my mind just played tricks on me. But I do know this: I'm never staying home alone for 2 weeks again.